Start again.
Yeah, kick off.
Good evening. Welcome to another session of Cat Space. Tonight's topic is quite controversial. It's on everyone's lips and minds, and we're talking about justice for George Floyd. With me tonight and sharing his buckets and my mentor, Horsey. Good evening, everyone. Hope everyone's ready.
Yes, we're ready.
Good evening, Kat. Good evening, Buckets. Yeah, I'm well. You good?
Tonight's conversation is quite controversial, so I urge you all to sit back and get your thinking caps on. First question is, do people realize that George Floyd would have been given a life sentence had he been alive due to America's strict three-strike policy?
Yes, so America has a three-strike policy where if a person commits 3 crimes, they basically get a life sentence. And please stop doing that. And if you basically, the thing is about George Floyd is that he was convicted of putting a gun to a pregnant woman's stomach. He was also convicted of drug dealing. And he was also, the final thing which basically got him killed was he was, as you said before, he created counterfeit notes. Now, a lot of people are going, well, it's counterfeit notes. Does that really warrant a death sentence?
Of a straw that break the camel's back, to coin a phrase.
Yes. And no, but he still should have been taken to an interrogation room for which he would have been put on trial, and he would have been in life imprisonment anyway. And there's probably a really good chance that people wouldn't be doing scholarships in his name or any of that other stuff. But it's only because he's died under custody that they're basically seeing him as the next Martin Luther King.
Now, my theory on this is, had he been alive, how much of a difference the treatment would have been. I mean, surely he would have been arrested, put in the car, sent to prison, sentenced on a light sentence of maybe 2 to 5 years, maybe longer than that.
He would have been given life.
But he would have, depending.
No, the 3-strike rule clearly states that if you commit 3 crimes in America, you would have been given life. And that's why America...
Regardless of who you are or what your skin color is that right?
That's correct, because they take all your rights away from you. So you're not allowed to vote. You have a life sentence, which I believe is 50 years, I think. And basically that's it. And there's no way you can get out of it. You can get out of it perhaps on good behavior, get out in 12 years.
That's what I was thinking. Was that, how much of a difference would that treatment have been due to the fact that, he should have been given the same treatment or same human right as everybody else walking this planet? And it was, when I first witnessed it live, it was sort of, for me, it was numbing. It was painful to watch. I cried. I literally cried. And it's horrifying to see the treatment of humanity, the treatment of people, depending on their skin color. And what I believe is
that's right. What it might come down to is police officer involved, who of course has now been convicted and sent to prison himself. It might just come down to his own personal views and the action he took on that occasion, which, I mean, he may have regretted later on, but nevertheless, he took that action. So if it had been someone else, but a different officer arresting George Floyd, the outcome might have been quite different. And we wouldn't be talking about George Floyd now. We'd be talking about something else.
And my next question is, I was going to ask this, but Philip did bring up a new point. Is George Floyd seen as the new Dr. Martin Luther King here purely because he was a Black man that died? And my answer to that is yes, because the way he died should not have happened. It was broad daylight and it was murder, and the cop knelt on his, and he had him on the grounds. He handcuffed him to the ground, put his knee on him and kept pressing while George Floyd was screaming out, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, get off of me, I can't breathe. Please, officer, please, I can't breathe. Please, let me go, I can't
I think
breathe.
we all agree on that the treatment was not just.
When
And
someone
I think
says,
justice is coming too. But,
yeah, when someone says, I can't breathe, get off of that person, put him in the car and drive off. The man couldn't breathe. That statement,
Now,
3 solid words.
Dr. Martin Luther King was an activist who was advocating for the rights of people with a darker skin color. He's I have a dream man, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I have a dream that everybody will be equal.
Yeah.
I mean, George Floyd didn't actually make speeches like that himself. And you might say he didn't advocate for that cause. His death is the thing that has brought that to light.
Mm.
I wouldn't say that he was actively pursuing that cause, but so I don't think it's entirely correct to say he is the modern day Martin Luther King.
Mm.
I think that the circumstances in which he was killed are the things that bring that cause to light rather than his own actions. That's what I would put.
So I would see that the actions of the police officers have now made his death more meaningful, because now the entire Black community is basically seeing him as a martyr. Not just that, but I think they're just seeing him as a martyr.
But the thing is, now he has a scholarship under his name. He has a street under his name. He was given a state funeral. He basically is, as I've said, and my question is he the new Dr. Martin Luther King? And that is, I stand by that, because that's what I believe, is that if you look at it that way, like he brought on change the way, they will look at it and say, well, Dr. Martin Luther King was murdered because he said all men are, all men should be treated equally, and that will reach the promised land, and that this and that. But when George Floyd couldn't breathe, it was like he became a martyr, a hero, a champion of, people of different skin colors. And people are going to be taught that, children are going to be taught that in school. Who is George Floyd? Why did he have to die that way? No. Why was he killed?
Oh, indeed. Indeed. But I don't think that he was actively pursuing that cause. As I said, it's more the circumstances of his death that have brought that about. I wouldn't describe him in the same class as Dr. Martin Luther King for that reason. It doesn't change the fact that what happened to him most probably happened because he was a Black man, and that's the point. And as I said, I think justice has been served by the police officer being sent to prison. But yeah, that is the point. It's because he was dark-skinned, and which shows that while Martin Luther King made some great strides in his lifetime, the attitude is still there, particularly in the US. I mean, not so much here in Australia, I don't think, but particularly in the US, in certain parts of the US, that attitude still exists, which it's a worry.
Well, we do have a Black Lives Matter in Australia, but it's not like the American Black Lives Matter. It's more of an Aborigine cause. So they did have that in town hall, where a lot of Aborigines got up and were, I don't want to say rioting, because they weren't actually rioting, but they were peacefully protesting about the death of George Floyd. But like Australians kind of do it the right way, kind of thing. They don't burn down buildings and things like that to make their voices heard. They just walk down the street, which is a lot better. That's so that you do have different pockets of Black Lives Matter, but I think the whole culture of America is, we're going to make this a big deal, and we're going to burn things down, and we're going to basically make sure that you understand what we're all about, whatever. So
But here's my next question. If a white person had died, would there have been the same reaction? Say if it wasn't George Floyd and it was a, I don't want to get in trouble, but if a white person or a white-skinned person had died the way George Floyd died, would there be the same reaction, or would there be the same?
I would hardly think so. I've never heard of anybody saying that white lives matter. Though when the Black Lives Matter slogan was all over the place after George Floyd's death, it was on the back of cars, bumper stickers and everywhere. It was said that, no, you should say all lives matter. But then that was poo-pooed for some reason, as if that was, taking away from the cause of Black Lives Matter. But I think that actually each human life is, I believe, created by God, the Creator, and is of value, regardless of whether your skin's black, white, or yellow, or orange, or whatever. I'll get in trouble for saying all that too these days. But regardless of what you look like, everybody has a contribution to make, and every life does matter.
Exactly.
So but one of the things is in America, when you had a lot of Black Lives Matter groups starting to pop up, what actually also happened was there are a lot of White Lives Matter that popped up. But when you say White Lives Matter, people associate that with neo-Nazism. And so when you say, oh, well, you're white, you must be racist if you're only supporting the white race. But the minute there's Black Lives Matter and Black lives are the only lives that matter, well, then that's a kind of racism that no one wants to kind of admit to. But it's true, and no one wants to make that point. So that's why I like to say all lives matter, not to diminish Black Lives Matter, but rather to say that all lives do matter, because all lives do matter. It's not one. I don't judge people by the color of their skin. I judge people by the actions that they do.
And that is exactly what Dr. Martin Luther said, that, we don't judge people by the color of their skin. It actually doesn't matter. So rather than saying, well, this person has a certain skin color and this person over here has a different skin color, and so there may be a difference, it actually, we should look beyond that. And, it shouldn't make any difference. I suppose, though, that, Black Lives Matter and other slogans and causes to advance the cause of dark-skinned people is a reaction to the fact that for centuries, dark-skinned people were considered to be second-class citizens. And it's only really in the 20th century that has changed, late 20th century, really. So I guess it's to redress the balance. You hear the same thing said about the rights of women. And still, I heard a thing on the radio today about the fact that women are still paid, 15% less on average than male employees doing the same job. So that still isn't right. I don't understand why, whether it makes any difference at all, but that's a fact still. And the feminist movement, which began in the 60s, largely or around about then, championed by people like Germaine Greer and others, who then sort of tended to get a bit nasty about men, and then they were labelled man haters, and so the thing went right the other way, and that was a shame. But they just wanted to redress the balance in the beginning and say, well, we want everybody to be equal, because until it is equal, we'll keep going, and that's fair enough. That's fair enough. We should look beyond. I mean, in the same way, we should look beyond whether someone is a male or female as to what they get paid and how they are treated. We should look beyond what colour someone's skin is as to how they are treated, and treat them as a human being the same. And what it gets back to, as I said before, is you treat others as you want to be treated yourselves, and you consider everybody to be of value. And if we did that, then these problems wouldn't exist. They really wouldn't.
That's very true.
And here's a point you brought up that I wanted to mention, is that where is it? Oh yeah. Does the death of George Floyd give movements such as Black Lives Matter way more power than they already have?
I think they do.
Oh, definitely.
Because they're using George Floyd as their kind of idol or statue or force, or there's mascot. There's the word I'm looking for. So they're using George Floyd as their mascot, where all their power comes. It's a bit like the West Tigers, really. They use a tiger as their mascot, and everyone backs it up. And they're doing the same thing with George Floyd. I mean, everyone's kind of forgetting the fact that George Floyd was a bona fide criminal, but didn't actually die for a cause, but died because of mismanagement. But they're using George Floyd as their group's mascot, and there's a lot of power behind mascots. And I think that's just what they're doing. I think that's kind of wrong in a way. I do understand that George Floyd has died. I feel so sad but from the family members that have had to lose a family member. But when you start kind of using deaths as mascots, it's a bit selfish. It's a bit selfish.
That's what I was alluding to before, Buckets, in that George Floyd is being ascribed much more power and much more influence than he actually had, and his death was the result of someone else's actions, not himself pursuing a cause.
Let's see. What's the next question? Let's see. Oh, okay. So do you believe that justice was actually served? Because today, it seemed like it was. There might be a bit of issues around training, though. See, the thing is, the move that he made, that police officer was trained by the police to make that move. So the question is there a problem with basically the training itself, or was it basically the police officer's fault to begin with?
Well, it wasn't the training in itself. I mean, the move he made, or the physical action he took to restrain Floyd, may well have been legitimate as per the training, but it was carried on too long. And when it became apparent that George Floyd was in fear of his life, it was still carried on. So that's purely and simply the action and the decision of that officer at the time, for whatever motivation. That's all it was. It wasn't anything to do with the training, I don't think, although I'm not familiar with what training happens. But I think that's all it is.
Well, they would have gone through some basic sort of, for lack of a better word, defensive training to deal with cases like that, and that would have been one of them. But all you have to do is just read the slogan on the American card that literally says "We protect and serve," and he wasn't protected. And who were they serving? So it's
well, who was? I mean, was George Floyd a great threat at that point? And in that case, who was he protecting from the actions of George Floyd? I mean, perhaps there was a struggle, but I mean, if the worst came to the worst and George Floyd was let go, he would be apprehended again and ultimately captured. So the same, he would still be captured. He wouldn't get away forever. So, if he had escaped on that occasion, then so be it. They'd take action to get him again. That's what they do, and that's what they're trained to do. And that's while it may have been a failure on the part of that officer in that particular arrest, then it's certainly not as bad a situation as the death of the man they're trying to apprehend in anybody's book.
Now, the question is, has the entire case and reaction from the public been entirely race-based? And the answer to that is pretty much straight out, yes, it's a known fact. This whole thing is basically, I mean, I can't say I know all knowledge on American, America and its civil liberties, but if you look back in their history, that it all started with the fact that it was a race issue, that it was, you know, they are treated differently, second class citizens. I mean, you look at, I know this is going off topic or track, but if you look at Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, other, you know, people, they got shot and murdered because they believed, you know, they're of a different skin color. But if, you know, the reaction to the public is it a race war?
Well,
Yes.
So the thing is, right, they're selling that, the Black Lives Matter people are selling that as a race war. But you have to also remember, why did they pursue that guy to begin with? Was it because purely of the color of his skin? Or was it because they had a warrant to pursue George Floyd because he was getting busted for counterfeiting notes?
Well, that's certainly the case, I think.
So it's
whether I mean, some of the officers involved could have been prejudiced against people with dark-coloured skin. Obviously, they at least one was, and so that's it. But you know, the thing about Black Lives Matter, I've been looking at a few of what the things they've been involved in, and the people they claim to serve and the causes they claim to advance. And they very quickly associated themselves with a lot of different, not only people of dark skin, but a lot of different groups in society who appear to be marginalised, including people of intersex gender and that sort of thing. So they're definitely humanists, the Black Lives Matter people. They definitely believe in the power of humanity to solve problems. That's something I don't really agree with myself. I don't think their values don't really align with mine. Not that really makes any odds, but I'm a little bit concerned about what their real motivation is. I suspect that, like the people they are trying to oppose, their motivation is actually to gain power in society.
Yeah,
that's what I think they're, in the end, when it comes down to brass tacks, that's what I think Black Lives Matter is about. They want power in the same way as the authorities they are opposing
have oppressed them. Yeah,
want power as well. So in some ways, Black Lives Matter are no better than they are.
It certainly, it's almost like, well, I'd say exactly like, it's when you have a bunch of freedom fighters wanting to liberate a country because they feel that they're oppressed, and then they oppress others to gain their freedoms.
That's right. Black Lives Matter are definitely libertarians, and the trouble with libertarians is they want to achieve liberty, and when you achieve liberty, if it goes too far, you've got anarchy. And so what they solve on one hand will end up being just as bad on the other side. The difference is they're in control, or they reckon they're in control. But yeah, so it's, you've got to strike a balance in society. We're talking about races before. I mean, look, in Australia, there are a number of people from different nationalities who, to be honest, I don't really like. I wish they weren't here. I wish they'd go home. I really do. And the reason for that is because I don't think their culture matches very well with what was, anyway, some years ago, the Australian culture, which is changing, admittedly, because of the multicultural nature of our society. But I could be accused of being a racist if I came out and said, I don't like those people. I wish they'd buzz off back to their own country where they fit in. So that's the trouble. I don't say anything because I recognise if they've been allowed into the country, I recognise their right to immigrate and to set up an existence here and to live as they want to live. I don't understand it, why people want to speak their own language in a different country instead of speaking the language of the country. If I moved to a different country, I would love to learn the local language, the local customs, eat the local food, participate in all that is the nature of that society. I would love that opportunity. It'd be great. But for some reason, people don't want to do that when they live in Australia. And I don't understand it.
No, but here's the thing, right?
Well, I can
And I can't
technically answer
criticise
that
it because
question.
that's their choice.
I can kind of answer that question. So when immigrants come over here, or refugees or any migration comes over here, they want to stick to who they know, and then they need to feel safe.
That's
And
right.
so, basically, they will connect with people that understand their culture, that will understand their race, that will understand people just like them. You know, some will cross integrate and it'll work for them, but others kind of like to stick within their own small subculture, because it makes them feel safe. And you know what? When you're in a foreign country and you don't have any friends, you want to stick with people that you associate with, and that's what happens.
You identify. That's right.
But when you know, legally, and if you want to live in Australia, you legally have to speak English if you want to, you know, be a citizen of this country. And if you cannot speak English, you're legally not allowed to stay here. And this is why English is like the number one subject in Australia for foreigners, because they want to stay here because they love our country.
So why then do we have certain areas, particularly in Sydney, where all the shops have signs and banners in a different language? There may be English there as well. In fact, in many cases there is, but primarily the signs and banners and advertising is in a different language. And you walk into these areas and you think, hang on a minute, what country am I in? I think that's wrong. I think that everything public should be in English. I don't agree with the dominance of a different language, even in a particular specific area. That is, you know, in Australia, where the common language is English and should primarily be English.
As someone who is of a different culture, someone who is of a different minority, as someone who has a different culture, comes from a different culture of two different backgrounds. I'm part Lebanese, part Armenian. And as you said, you walk around Sydney, you see all these shops with, you know, writing of a different language. And if I walked in a neighborhood and I saw that, I would, depending on where I am, I probably want safety. I'd want to feel safe in my own environment, my own culture. And, you know, as far as Black Lives Matter, as far as different skin tone, who are we to judge them? Who are we to judge, period? It's not up to us to judge, it's up to God. And they're human beings. We are human beings. We need to sort of, you know, they've been in fear for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years.
That's
and
correct.
you know, and they don't feel safe in their own country because being shot and killed, you know, instantly, you know, how, you know, it's frightening. I feel so bad and so awful for the parents. Like, I cry for these parents. Like, I pray for the family. And, you know, I don't want to offend or anger or insult anybody because I don't want to, but I fear for them because it's not easy to leave your home to go for a walk and, or go to, you know, having to even go to school. They're having to carry weapons on them because they fear they'll either be hit or killed, or, you know, they can't go shopping because you have, you know, a white neighborhood that's sort of, how do I say this polite? I don't want to insult anybody or offend anybody, but what Trump brought out is he incited this evil. He incited this havoc. He incited the, you know, the I don't care, the, you know, make America great again, the sort of white privilege, you know, white
Yeah,
supremacy.
he was certainly seen as a white supremacist, whether he actually is. That's the way he came across, certainly.
But I would argue that was in America even before Trump was president. And I would argue that that fear, where you've got black neighborhoods and stuff like that, carrying guns and stuff like that, between rival gang members and stuff, that fear It's been there.
Yeah, but it's not
for
just gang members.
100
It's they've
100
had
years.
fears. They've had fears for hundreds and hundreds of years. But I'm saying it's someone like Trump who came into power for 4 years, and just even though there was that much evil already, but made it predominantly felt in his presence that the white supremacy, that the white man or the white person had more of a privilege living in the United States of America because they're white, but as of African American people don't have that privilege because they're oppressed and they've been oppressed for hundreds of years. And he incited this dark evil thing. He brought out the the hate and the division and the anger, and he made
Whether he intended to or not, that's certainly what has happened.
Well, that his presidency has divided America, but if this is one thing my mum would always say is, it takes two to tango. So whenever I would fight with my brother, I would always say he started it. Well, it takes two to tango. So in what the way that I see it is that Black Lives Matter as a group could have easily dispersed at any period of time if they chose to, but they didn't want to. They wanted to be a group. They wanted to change the political landscape. They wanted to fight for Black rights, which is fine. That's within their rights to do so. They wanted to be treated as equals, again within their rights to do so.
They're humans.
And they didn't want to be oppressed, and they felt that they were oppressed. They felt that there were lots of gun violence in America. They felt that there are more Black people in prisons than there are white people, and they were tired of this oppression. And so naturally, they were forming groups to fight this quote unquote power.
Okay, but here's the thing. Okay, here's where your question ties. Here's the question where your issue ties in, is that could Black Lives Matter groups be a potential force in how the political landscapes get shaped in America? Here's where that question ties.
Well, I would say absolutely yes, because the thing is about groups is that that's a constituency. That creates a constituency like any other group. And so if that group likes, and see, this is why I think Kamala Harris is going to be the next president of the United States, because she keys in with all of those groups which support multiculturalism. And I think if I don't know how many people are actually in Black Lives Matter currently, but it's become what I'm seeing is that most of America loves multiculturalism and likes to fight for multiculturalism. And so when you have a president that basically looks like the very people that she's supporting and acts like the very people that she's supporting and fights for the ideals that they're supporting, I can guarantee you Kamala Harris will be the president of the United States.
Okay, here's the next question, right? Since there is a George Floyd scholarship available, is George Floyd better remembered for his death as a martyr rather than how George Floyd lived his life?
Well, how he lived his life wasn't
the
too
question
close.
is,
Yes.
I'll repeat it. Since there is a George Floyd scholarship available, is George Floyd better remembered for his death as a martyr rather than how George Floyd lived his life?
Absolutely. I think he's known, he's more, he's a bit like Picasso. Well, actually, that's the wrong, he's basically like, well, any artist that's painted anything in their lives. Their art is worth more when they die. When they live, their art isn't worth that much, but the minute they die, their art is worth thousands. A lot more. And
certainly, I think he's much more famous in his death. But getting back to, we were talking about shops with different languages on them, that sort of thing, and how people don't feel safe when they emigrate and they're in a country other than the country of their birth. And so they feel the need to live in enclaves because they feel more comfortable there. I personally think as a society, what we've got to do is we've got to make people feel comfortable, even though they're not in their native land. And how you do that is you say, right, if you emigrate to Australia, then you've got to learn English and you've got to give that a go. But if you're having difficulty with that, then that's okay. We accept that. but just keep going. And see, this is the problem. People feel uncomfortable and even unsafe because of the perception of the way they're viewed by society, and because they're not in their own country. I mean, you know, they feel isolated. So of course it's natural to want to get together with your fellow countrymen, and it ends up being that sort of enclave, which then doesn't expand beyond its own borders, all because of a perception of the way that people are viewed by society. And again, I'll say it: if people thought that they're accepted regardless of where they were, because regardless of who they are or what they look like, they have a contribution to make, I think there'd be a lot less of that. And that'd be great to see. You know, people being accepted for who they are. Some people will be able to assimilate better than others, and that's the way it is. But you know, that's okay. And I think if our society had more of that attitude, then we'd see a lot less of the you know, people being in fear because they feel unsafe and they have to stick with their own. I think we'd see a lot more people who have emigrated willing to sort of branch out and become part of the society which they have joined. And wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be really good?
I mean, I have to say, in my heart, I support them, and I support everything they're going through, because even though I'm not out there protesting doesn't mean I'm racist or I don't support them. I do. And here's where my, here's where my other question is. Derek Chauvin, he showed no remorse. Will he get a long sentencing, or will he be out in 10 to 12 years, depending on what the judge throws at him when it comes to being behind bars? Because he's got second degree unintentional murder, that's 40 years, third degree murder, that's 25 years, and second degree manslaughter, that's 10 years. So technically 75 years. But when it comes down to the sentencing in a few weeks, will he be out in 10 to 12 years as per what is being told or heard because of this incident?
You know what? I think that prison time is going to be probably tougher for that gentleman purely because he's a cop, and there are criminals in there that want to punch him up because he's a police officer. So that he's going to have a real tough time in prison unless he straightens up in prison. So it's hard to say that he'll get 12 years off in good behavior. That's what he wants. I mean, I'm sure all prisoners want to get out as quickly as possible. But I mean, there will be a lot of people wanting to come after him, because not only is it a high profile case, but there's going to be a lot of dissent against him. You've got African American groups that are in prison that would have heard about him that will want to attack him. You'll have the prison guards that won't like him because they'll say he betrayed the uniform. You know, he'll need to make some friends really, really quickly in prison, or he's going to have a real tough time of it. And
you'll also have white guys in prison who reckon he's an absolute hero. I think that fellow will, when he gets to prison, he will have to largely give away the reasons why in the beginning he became a police officer, to uphold justice and right. I think he will have to kind of become a little bit worse in his character, and then he'll survive in prison. That's what's going to happen to him. That's what he's going to have to do. I mean, that's unfortunate, but I think that's the reality of what, if you go to prison and you're seen to be, you know, in any way above anybody else who's around you in prison, then you will be beaten up. But if they realize that you're actually one of them after all, regardless of what you've been in the past, then you have a chance of surviving, and that's what he'll have to do.
But when the verdict was read out, he showed zero remorse. Like even in his new mugshot, it showed him, his shoulders were broadened out. He was standing straight looking up at the camera as if to say,
What did I do wrong?
no, not what did I do wrong, or I'd do it again in a heartbeat. That, in the court, if he was pretty cold, there was no tears, there was no remorse, there was no, oh my God, what have I done? There was none of that. But thing is, from what I was watching yesterday and today, is that they believe that he can get out of prison within 10 to 12 years. I mean, 10 to 12 years is a good behavior bond, but
It's still a long time.
yeah, still a long time, but no police force
fair
is going
while.
to want him. No company is going to want him.
Yeah. Anyone that associates with him, okay, it could be like Halsey has, there might be some white guys that want to associate him, but there'll be a lot of criminals in there that will just hate him because he's a police officer. He's going to have a rough time in prison. He will not have a pleasant time in prison at all. And
Well, he's got to curry favor with those guys
Yes.
and convince them that he is after all on their side.
Yeah.
And that's what he'll do to survive.
So
And when he
what
gets out, he'll link up with a few of these guys, and he'll probably he will never be an officer of the law again, but he'll probably link up with a few of these mates he meets in prison, and he'll do something else, I reckon.
exactly.
Before I ask the last question, the only thing I want to say about this is that where were the two other police officers who were with him at the scene who absolutely did nothing? They're probably in jail with him, but why weren't they convicted?
Because they weren't convicted because they pled. They were protected because I think this the Americans have something that you can't incriminate yourself, I believe. So I think they were protected because of the Fifth Amendment, I think. Don't quote me on that, I could be wrong. But because they testified and said exactly what happened, they were effectively protected. And if they try to argue their case and say, well, show the new evidence, they're going to think now, oh, wait, hang on, if this guy got like 75 years and won't be getting out for at least 12 years, what's the point of even arguing? Because the chances of me getting a higher sentence are really high. So I don't think that they would be, it would be easier for them to plead guilty than to plead innocent, to be honest.
Okay, and my last question for the night is the police training to blame for reckless behavior, and does it need to be reformed?
Yes, I believe so. I think that the training that the police officers are getting needs to be definitely reformed. I think that the fact that there was some, because it is a real move. It is a real move that police officers are trained to do. They need, well, for a start, they need to, I think that all police officers need to go through a psych test to see if they're mentally able to become police officers and not exploit the system. They also need to go through a fitness examination, and all these training things that would normally be acceptable under police law enforcement might actually have to be changed, so this never happens again.
I think the move that was used would certainly have to be revised.
The thing I want to say about this is that if it's going to be reformed, there needs to be a mental not just a physical evaluation, but a mental evaluation of the person who wants to become an officer, and check their capability to mentally be able to take the oath and wear the uniform and the badge. And I think,
well, the problem isn't wearing
but I still think there should be a mental evaluation.
I would have thought that would happen anyway.
The problem isn't wearing the uniform or wearing the badge or anything like that. The problem is a lot of police officers, when they join, they don't want to basically protect and serve. They want to really technically become gangsters and use.
They want power.
Yeah. So that's what you want to get out of the police force, is that need to want to become a gangster instead of, say, a police officer. But that's a reason why a lot of police officers join, because they have that.
I don't think that's you're ever going to get rid of that.
But I think that the entire training needs to change. But I also think that I think that the type, like, because if you look at if you look at basically an English police officer, an English police officer has a whistle or might have a baton, but guns and things like that, not unless they have a specific job in the police force, they don't really have them. Kind of think that's guns are really reserved for the military and things like that. So they might have to review to say, okay, well, what does excessive force mean? And do we have to take away the means to stop police officers from having excessive force? So they might
Well,
have
there's a
to
news
change
story today, wasn't there, about a policewoman, I forget where it was, but who shot someone because she mistook the gun for the taser gun.
Again, in America, she said she accidentally mistook the taser for a gun and shot him, but was that an accident? Absolutely not. No, I'm sorry. No, you don't misconfuse your taser for a gun. She pulled it out. She knew it was a gun. Bang, shot.
Well, apparently the feel of
what
the
a taser
taser is
is.
quite different.
And my last, I know I said that was the last question, but the last question I want to ask is, how do we make sure that not just in Australia, but around the world, that this does not happen anymore to any person of color or race?
Well, I don't think, like I said,
You can't entirely be confident that it will never happen again. All you can do is the best you can do as far as training and awareness goes, really. It's like anything else in this life. We can't 100% guarantee that that a tragedy won't happen.
Well, the thing is, what I was told about Australian police officers is that whenever they shoot a person, whether they die or not, I think they have to take like a month off, or they have to take some sort of period off, and they have to see a psychologist for a period of time after they shoot someone, because shooting someone can really mess. Well, it can mess with their melon, basically, and I have a funny feeling that the American police don't actually have someone like that. And I think they should have someone like that. Maybe they do, I'm not sure, but I think the government really in the United States needs to start putting more money into psychiatrists to better evaluate police officers if they're involved in some sort of conflict.
But even when they're on the job, get a counselor, get a psychiatrist, and every 6 months evaluate them.
Yes,
and if they're not fit, then I'm sorry, you're not fit for the job.
Look, if they can have military psychiatrists that come in to evaluate soldiers, why can't they do the same
for police officers? Yeah,
that's how I see it. And I think it's kind of necessary, because the last thing you want to have is a police officer that's experiencing burnout, and then he just starts lashing out on people.
I'd agree with that.
All I can say about it is vindication, justice for George Floyd has happened. I mean, there's still so much work to be done when it comes to race, ethnicity, culture, who we are as human beings. He was found guilty. He's going to rot in jail, and rest in peace, George Floyd. And, just hope and pray that, this is, as you said, you can't stop this from happening, but the less it happens, the better as human beings, the better as our world goes.
Maybe George Floyd is better out of this life, and I'd like to think the great man upstairs would, regardless of the things George Floyd may have done during his life, I'd like to think the great man upstairs would have said, "Okay, George, well, here's your rest now, and there we are." And
exactly,
he's in a better place.
Exactly. At the end of the day, who are we to judge? Final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I think that the 3-strike rule in the United States should be changed and looked at it from a case-by-case basis. Because, like, at the end of, if you look at all the crimes that George Floyd actually did commit, they were kind of small crimes. Okay, yes, the kidnapping one where he put a gun to a pregnant woman's
is bad.
But is incredibly bad and off the scales, right? But he was doing that for cash. So maybe the solution was really help George Floyd find a job or fix that economic problem in his life where he was kind of forced to put someone's life in danger to commit that crime. So that, I think, is maybe, instead of having a 3-strike rule and all your rights are taken away, I think maybe they should be investing more money in finding jobs for African Americans who are unemployed. So
I mean, you know, even if you commit a crime, then, as you say, things are dealt with on a case-by-case basis. I mean, your rights as a human being are never taken away, really. That's and the trouble with, you know, that 3 strikes sort of thinking is it's a blanket rule that applies to everything, and it's in some cases may be appropriate, in other cases may not. But we tend to fall back on, oh, the 3 strikes and you're out, that sort of thing. And the only place that's really appropriate, I think, is in high school baseball games. That's it.
What I was going to say, baseball. It's a base. If you notice that everything with American politics has either got to do with money or baseball, like the whole legal system is based off a baseball game. 3 strikes and you're out.
Anyway, before we say,
I like the kind of baseball where you have a big tee and you just hit the ball off the tee, because I could never hit it if someone's chucking it at me.
That's softball.
But before we say,
but I did like the running. I love the running. It's like playing football. I used to always like it when the other team had the ball, so I could run and chase the other players, which I was good at. If I actually got the ball, I had no idea what to do with it.
Now, before we say goodnight, we just want to say that, you know, if you like what you see, please don't forget to subscribe. It's very important to subscribe. Hit that notification bell. If there's a topic you would like us to discuss, make sure you leave a comment in the comment section, or you can follow our podcast page. We do have one on Facebook. So make sure you follow that and inbox us and leave some comments. Invite your friends to be a part of Cat Space, and just comment and subscribe. And, you know, when you hit that notification bell, you get all the content and the podcasts. And if there's something you want us to cover, again, don't forget to let us know, and we'll give you a shout out as a thank you. And the more subscribers, the better.
That's right. The more subscribers.
We're open to suggestions.
Yeah, we are open to suggestions. As of that, thank you so much, Horty, for joining us on this very educational, controversial topic. This has been quite an eye-opener for me. What about you?
Oh, it's been very educational.
Uru.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.